Hi guys, Joe and Reese here from the Average Pundits, and we are delighted to announce our very first giveaway here on the podcast. We've teamed up with the guys at Mystic to bring you one of their mystery football shirt boxes as part of our very first competition.
To make sure you have a chance at winning, you have to follow these simple steps. Now, you have to follow us, the Average Pundits, on social media, follow Mystic Mystery Boxes on social media, and tag 3 friends down below on this post.
It's really easy to do, and there will be a guaranteed winner at the end of it.
The winner will be announced in 3 weeks' time on the Average Pundits podcast, whether that be Spotify, Apple Music, or YouTube. So make sure you go and subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on our streaming platforms to know if you are the winner. Thank you very much for everybody that enters, and good luck to all of you.
You are listening to the Average Pundits podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Hi guys, and welcome back to the Average Pundits podcast, your home of all things Premier League. And we've got a brand new podcast edition episode that we're looking to start bringing in a little bit more, something a bit different to what we normally cover. But I will let my co-host Reese introduce it. How are you, Reese?
Good. It's one of the ideas that we've been looking into for a little bit of a time now. Something a bit different on the podcast. Yeah, we've done team dives before and player dives before. You know, we've looked into the sort of the philosophy of certain managers, but this is a completely different. We're throwing the rule book out the window, and we are going for kind of a series of rebuilds. You know, we'll go into specific Premier League teams that aren't performing so great. And we're going to take those and see how we would make it better. And I guess the first real episode in this rebuilding series, we've decided to go. We kind of set a parameter of, who do we go with? Do we go with an expensive team with a lot of budget? Do we go with a lower team with no budget at all? I think we found a common ground here, and we've gone with Wolverhampton Wanderers, who haven't been the greatest of teams as of yet, have they?
No, not by any way, shape, or form. I think we were both looking at potential clubs to cover, and we both kind of thought and stopped and were like, oh, okay, let's do Wolves. Because, again, a regular kind of phrase on the podcast, just again, put it on a t-shirt. Wolves are a weird club. But we've been saying that since we started.
Somewhere on this frame or wherever, just Wolves are a weird club. I think I'm just going to start merging it somewhere.
Just have it everywhere. Everywhere we can actually get it. But it's something that we've been saying for a long time on the podcast for various reasons. We've been covering this since like September 2019 when we started. I'm right, the February 2021 now, and our position on Wolves is still very much the same. On their day, a giant killer. Every other day, awful. And the man up at the helm, if we start before we go into the actual kind of rebuild of the team, Nuno Espirito Santo is the top guy over at Wolves and has been for quite a while now. Reese, I know previously in the past you've been quite a big fan of Nuno. As have I, a very, very interesting manager, brought us some interesting football, which saw him beat a lot of top Premier League clubs. But I don't know if you're feeling me on this one. I'm starting to ask questions about him. I don't know about you.
I feel like with any manager nowadays, they've got to be given time. And I've always said that, since we started doing the podcast, and even before then, Wolves are should have been a couple transfer windows away from being contenders for European football. And I've always said this, they've got the pieces for it. They've got a very competent captain in Connor Cody. They've got, but what, at a time considered one of the best keepers in the world in Rui Patricio. They've got someone who is going to, form into one of the best centre midfielders in the world in Ruben Neves, and a lot more pieces to the puzzle that they have found great. But for Nuno, it hasn't worked as of yet. But I feel like with this young group of guys, I think they've brought into Nuno at this point, and I'm not sure whether it's the club surrounding Nuno. But I mean, at the moment, he's in hard times. They've spent £80 million in the window just gone, and the pieces he's brought in haven't worked. He brought in Fabio Silva, who just isn't ready to fit into the starting lineup.
Yeah, not at all.
And he's had to go out and loan Willian Jose into the squad to fill in the boots of Raul Jimenez, who's injured. That's played a massive part. I think injuries. I think Pundits is currently out. Jimenez is out. There's a lot of players that are currently out injured, and that's why I think that Nuno isn't exactly the one to blame. He's still got remnants of a championship, in EFL side. He does because he's brought, yeah, yes, he's brought in a lot of players, but he let go Diogo Jota, and he just hasn't been able to spend that money that they got from Jota in the window just gone. They brought in Fabio Silva, obviously they brought in Marcal, they brought in Nelson Semedo, who at the time everyone thought, oh my goodness, what's going on? But
Yeah.
they just haven't seemed to be gelling as a team. I don't know whether it's the fast pace of people coming outside the Premier League, or whether it's just. I think it's just out of Nuno's control at this point. The world that football's playing in at the moment, I think it's a bit. It's completely different. A lot
Yeah.
of teams are struggling. Not a lot of teams have the necessary requirements that they have, and I think I do still think Wolves are a couple transfer windows off competing. They have the pieces. It's just whether they invest smartly.
See, I think I've had a very similar mentality for a very long time. The clubs outside of the traditional six, which is a dead concept now. I mean, I want to put that out there. The traditional six now, it means nothing. Arsenal haven't been good enough in a very long time. United have been teetering. There's far more clubs which are definitely being added to that conversation now. And the two which have always interested me in the recent years have been Leicester and Wolves. And I feel that a lot of the times they've been on par, and then all of a sudden Leicester just astronomically surge forward, where Wolves just falter. They'll go out and beat a City, and then they'll end up losing to a Burnley or something. So it's a difficult one to say. But in terms of Nuno, I've enjoyed what he's brought to the club. Typically seeing him playing some good counter-attacking football. A lot of the time they kind of position themselves but like a coiled spring against a lot of top Premier League sides, and then the second they get that possession back, it's just attack, attack, attack. And, in the heights, you see Raul Jimenez, obviously, is someone still at the club, sadly injured right now, a fantastic Premier League striker. Last season, Adama Traore was lighting up football fans all over the world. Everyone was paying attention to him. Diogo Jota, again, a fantastic player, but sadly, Wolves has lost as Liverpool's gain. It was a very good transfer. Haven't been able to see too much of him so far, but definitely a good player for the future. But I feel like in some ways Nuno did quite well. I mean, Pedro Neto but he is one of the best young players in the Premier League. He is fantastic on his day.
He doesn't get a shout, when it comes to like youngsters in the Premier League. He doesn't really get brought up. But him and Podence. I mean, Podence is 25 at the moment, but Neto at 20. He doesn't get nearly enough shouts for like being a great young talent in this Wolves side. And
No, I agree.
It's kind of detriment to that because obviously he doesn't have the firepower up front to help him. This season. So Neto probably doesn't get the credit that he deserves.
I mean, Neto's somebody that I would absolutely love for us to go out and poach. I think he's a fantastic player, and he's got a direct kind of succession path to do well in football if he's just got the right manager. I mean, he doesn't have to leave Wolves for that to happen. He just needs someone there who's going to get the most out of him. And like you said, that the injury to Raul Jimenez has been to detriment of Wolves. They haven't been scoring as much, but there was meant to be a plan in place. You mentioned Fabio Silva. I don't know. Like they spent so much money on him, and you've got to think, okay, he's a player for the future. That was an investment, but they needed to rely on him a lot sooner. And I think even though they paid that money for him and he is young, I think he is still 18 years old. They are still getting him out there quite early on in the Premier League, which is good. I mean, young players are getting put into clubs a lot earlier nowadays, and I think they need to get that minimum experience out there. But maybe if you look back on it now, signing Silva and then maybe loaning him back to the Portuguese league for a little bit of time might have saved him a lot of early heartbreak in the Premier League. There's been so many moments where just the strength isn't there, the vision isn't there, and that's all something that will come in time. The Premier League's tough, and a young guy just coming over from a different league at such a young age without the experience under his belt, of course he's going to struggle. But that's a question which I think has to go back to Nuno, because obviously it's him and the transfer board which okayed that decision, but there were red flags there. Surely there are red flags there. But I mean, you can look at Manchester United, for example. They recently spent 35 million on a youngster, which I think's only made a couple of appearances for Atalanta's first team in Amad Diallo. So it's other clubs that do it, but Fabio Silva's been a player they've had to rely on quite early on, and for me, it's not good enough. So I think a lot of the business that's been done recently by the club hasn't been good enough. Still the same kind of players hanging around. I think there's a lot more progression that's been needed. A lot of time in the season, they've been relying on like a 35-year-old João Moutinho. And I think it was only a few podcasts ago I said that. Also, I said something along those lines, and I also criticised Neves, and they both scored, which is just beyond typical.
It was that podcast, and as we were recording it, Moutinho scores an absolute worldie. So I sent the video to Joe over social media. He's like, "You're still going to critique him, are you?"
Yeah, genuinely, it was just absolutely mental. I still think though that for the last couple of seasons, both of those midfielders haven't maybe been up to the heights which we tended to associate them with. But as good as players as they are on their day, there's still time, and their goals came in a 2-1 win over Arsenal. And obviously, not credit them too much. They beat Arsenal.
Who hasn't?
We can't beat them, but Wolves can beat them. We can't beat them. I feel like what we're going to break down a bit later on for you with some of our own picks and some of our own decisions that we've come to in ways which could help the club, because there are ways they can improve. There's some golden players that stood in the club, but there are ways they can improve. So I think if we shift this onwards, we both kind of had our opinions of Nuno there, and maybe there's a couple of managers that I might mention a little bit later on in the podcast which could potentially come in. But if we start with you, Reese, if you're given a realistic budget to Wolves in the summer to come up, how much money do you reckon realistically they have to spend? Let's say for the sake of Nuno's at the helm and he's been told this is the money you've got.
So, well, you've got to go based on what they've spent in previous years. Obviously we were in a pandemic, so the money's not going to be the best thing, and they've got to try and make that money back at some point, and it's going to be tough. It really is. And I think Jota was sold so they could spend more, and it just wasn't invested well. And I think if we were to go, 2018 they spent 100 million. 2019 they spent 115 million, and the summer just gone they spent 74 million. So I think if we're gonna look in terms of a budget that works in the current climate that we're in, that fits the squad as well, because this squad, it's struggling. If you look at their past 7 results, they've had a lot of. I think this is why it's key to note that's why we're doing this rebuild. The 2-0 loss against Southampton, the 1-0 loss against Crystal Palace, the 3-2 against a struggling West Brom side, the 2-1 loss to Everton, the 2-1 loss to Burnley, the 3-3 at Brighton, and the killer game, which was 4-0 away, 4-0 to West Ham, and these losses were just poor by the side. So I feel like the money that we need to try and it's got to be realistic. This isn't like go out and buy Ronaldo. It's not go out and buy Ronaldo. It's not go out and buy Messi. We're not giving them billions of pounds. We're not giving them a takeover. We're not saying that the money's coming in. I think realistically we're going to go around 80 million pounds, and that's before we have sold sort of tried to move on a couple other players as well.
Yeah, 80 million. I can see your reasoning there. Obviously, the 100 million was the last big fee kind of spent all together in a window. I had a very similar kind of method. I think that if we're talking in the realism of Wolves, they need to spend money. Clearly, they need to spend money to progress. But after spending all of that money, and obviously they are wealthy, but it depends on how much he's going to get backed. And I don't think he's been backed 100% in the last window. I think he definitely had his influence in there, but maybe there could have been decisions which, were a little bit more in his favor. So I don't think they're going to go as hot and heavy. I think anywhere between 60 to 80, as you mentioned. I'm going to average it out in the middle. I'm going to set myself 70. So 80 for you, 70 for me. Not too much difference really in there, but we're in a similar kind of bracket. This is the kind of fee that we think realistically they're going to be potentially given if they're backed properly. That should be what I think they should be looking at in order to make some kind of a difference.
Definitely. And I think, with the players that we might look to move on as well, that adds to the budget, and that's kind of what I've been thinking of. We can give them that budget and then sell some players on to help with the budget to buy more players, and I think that's going to be key in how we're going to look at this, and whether it's going to be realistic that we're going to be able to bring in these players with the budget. I'm not too sure. I think I might have gone a little bit overboard. I've gone very close to the edge of the budget after I've sold some players. So we'll have to see about that as well.
Well, if we're going to kick it off, areas which Wolves have been struggling in, defense, midfield, and attack. There's been areas all over the pitch, really. But in terms of defense, I think they've bringing in Semedo. He hasn't exactly hit the heights as of yet. I think he was, again, signs of struggling at Barcelona. So that's another question I have to go back to Nuno with. Maybe you could have seen the signs there. Maybe it was maybe not the smartest decision, but you've got him now. He's yours. Deal with it. When he's fit, Eight Nori sometimes on the left. I felt like they could maybe improve that left back position a bit. Roman Saiss, who's actually been one of their better players, as well as Connor Cody. Connor Cody, I think, has been the secondary defender so far this season. But another big centre back is one area that I think is needed. But the area which I want to focus on first to name a couple of positions in is that midfield. Ruben Neves and Jean Martino are the ones they normally kind of rely on. You occasionally see the odd performance from Gibbs White. I feel like some more talent is needed in the midfield. There's one man, which I think this may be a bit wishful thinking, but I just would want to know your thinking behind it. He's going to be available, I think, in the summer. I don't think he's going to stay at Liverpool. I don't think he's going to stay. But I'm not sure realistically how much Liverpool are going to want for him. His age may come into it. I think if I was going to spend, I'd spend no more than around 30 million on him. But Liverpool, being the transfer maestros they are, getting fees, they tend to get a little bit more. But what do you think about Jorginho Wijnaldum coming in? Another aging player, not too young, but somebody coming with bags of experience, Champions League winner, Premier League winner. He's played with bags of talent all over the pitch. I think if you slap someone like him into the midfield, he offers you a creative outlet. Because I think he's a little bit gassed out at Liverpool. Maybe he needs a change of scenery, but maybe staying in the Prem could be an option. Because the only other club which has been linked to him is Barcelona, which I can't even begin to say how many reasons I don't think that's a good transfer for him. But I don't know why, but he's someone which I think could potentially go into Wolves and make a bit of a difference.
I never even thought to look at the expiring contracts market. But see, with me, I thought with young talent, I went young, but Gini Wijnaldum, I think, could be one of those players that Wolves could need. If they can wait until Wijnaldum's contract's ended, swoop in and be like, hey, look, we'll offer you 20 million. It's better than leaving him, letting him leave on a free. And I think if he was to slot into that midfield spot where Moutinho sits, and like you say, Moutinho's not going to get any older. He's going to be 35 next year. I think he's 34 now. He's going to coming up to that 35th birthday. He's played all over the world, and yeah, he's not getting any younger. He's still great. He is a great player, but I think Gini Wijnaldum, I think he's 29 at the moment. I think he would slot into that spot really well. I think that's a really good inclusion, and if they were to get him so cheap, that would leave a lot of that kind of budget, there for Wolves.
Yeah, I think he would be a really interesting one because I think Nuno's preferred formation in the past has been either a 3-5-2 or like a 3-4-3. So typically, with a lot of time going forward,
it's kind of like a 5-2, like 3. It's like the two wing backs
with the wing backs pushing forward.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say a lot of the time their wingers they're one of the Premier League clubs which I think have pioneered attacking wingers really well when they first came into the Prem. Because even though at clubs like Liverpool, they play with 4 at the back, but how far forward do you find Robertson and Trent going? And that's something you find with a lot of Premier League clubs trying to replicate now. But
it's something that's costing Liverpool a lot of games, I'll tell you that now.
Yeah. But if you kind of think about that, I think if I'd market it, I'd kind of say a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3 with the 4 backs pushing forward. But I feel like the midfield's been there. They have Neves and Moutinho. Moutinho, I'd say, isn't really a DM. He sits a bit higher. Neves is more of a traditional DM. Like, he can do a lot of the dirty work. He's good at passing. He's got a rocket of a shot on him, which we know. But I feel like almost playing 3 in the middle could work, because recently, even as far back as I think a lot of it's to do with injury. But if we look at the 2-1 win against Arsenal, Wolves' more recent good performance, they played a full 2-3-1 formation. And at the back, Semedo and Kilman on as the 4 backs either side, with Cody and Bolly in the middle. And then Neves and Moutinho both sitting in the midfield slot. And then 3 attacking midfielders and the singular striker and Willian Jose. I think almost to play with the one DM and two creative midfielders would suit them a lot more. So if they're migrating to this back four, which is definitely alien territory in the grand scheme of things for Nuno, if they're going to run with it, I would very much like to see Neves holding that position. And then if you want to keep playing Moutinho, I think maybe two midfield signings are probably needed. But Moutinho and a player like Wijnaldum on the side could free up a lot more creativity in the team. Because sadly, right now, there's a lot of players in Wolves that are out of form and they need a creative outlet. So I think a good first name for me, I think, would be Wijnaldum. I'd love to hear your first name for a potential signing.
Well, before I go into my potential signings, I want to kind of free up a bit more budget for me and sell some players.
Okay.
I feel like the budget could do with selling other players, because obviously, financial fair play. You can't just go and splurge 80 million on everyone without selling a few players. And I think that the first name I really kind of want to get rid of is someone that hasn't created an attacking outlet much as of recently at all. And I know I've been such a big fan of this guy for so many months, but I think while he's not the attacking output that they need at the moment, they should cash in on Adama Traore. In
100.
turn, in terms of goal scoring ability, I've got another player that would suit that, and they could potentially swap deal. It could be a swap deal with the team that I've gone for the player for. But
Yeah.
Adama Traore hasn't scored in over a year now. Like you said earlier, he was lighting the world on fire. But Adama Traore is not the one to take Wolves forward, I don't think. And maybe he can find some form in a different league. That'd be amazing to see, because he's one of the purest athletes in football. In terms of that, but his football ability, his athleticism precedes his footballing ability. So
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. That's someone I had on my list as well. I mean, I don't know where you're thinking the fee is. For me personally, anywhere between 30 to 50 million is what I think you could potentially get for him. But it's trying to find the right home for him. I've said 35.
yeah, I think his transfer market value at the moment is about 36 million pounds. So if you add in the case that he is a starting player, teams will have to go above that market value in terms of going for this player. And he is a good player. He is a really good player on his day. So I've gone for around 40 to 45 million, and this is at the max. You're putting in a lot more in there. You're cashing for 45 million. That'd be
Yeah.
insane. That would be a great signing for them. I think that could be one of their key things. But also, I thought if they need to, I think while he's in this good form, and you've mentioned him before, he's been one of their best centre backs this season. And I think if they cashed in while he's in this good form, he's 30 at this point. It's Romain Says.
Yeah.
I feel because he's 30 at the moment. He's on the list of where I see the aging players at the moment. Says, Bolly, Moutinho, and also Patricio to an extent, but goalkeepers' primes are a bit weird when it comes to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So Patricio's still he can stay there for another year or two. That's not a priority. And I think if they could cash in, his market value is about £10 million. That could add to the transfer budget as well. So if we were to sell, Says for about £10 million and Adama Traore for £45 million, which is like the maximum I would say that teams would have to offer for him. That's an extra £55 million, which takes my budget up to 135. And I also want to kind of mention this: if they do get an offer for Connor Cody in the region of 30 to 40 million pounds, I would make them take it.
It's tough.
If someone was to come in, like say Liverpool came in and spent 30 to 40 million, it would be a bad signing for Liverpool, trust me. But not I mean in terms of spending 30 to 40 million on him. But if someone was to come in and actually be like, okay, we want him for 30 million, you'd have to take it, because that could be spent somewhere else.
Well, I definitely see the point about that. And Connor Cody, you mentioned Liverpool. Obviously, he's an ex-Liverpool player anyway, and he was someone that I thought that maybe if they could make it to the summer, they should look at potentially bringing in, because I think it'll be tough. He's a club captain, so I don't necessarily think they'd want to get rid of him. But he's passionate. He knows the game, and last season for Wolves, I think he was very prominent, and early this season he's been very good as well. But there's I think in the grand scheme of things, I think Saiss has been the main player. But I wouldn't get rid of either of them if I could help it. I think both of them have been the better signings, and I think it would be really hard to get a fee for Saiss just based on his age. And then I think just losing Cody in terms of a Wolves perspective would do more damage than it would do good, because it's just how quick they can replace them, and getting defenders to gel in with the team quite early can be a tough job. I mean, you look at like Ruben Diaz and Virgil van Dijk coming in and making instant impacts, but that's not always the case. It could take an awful lot of time to make the defenses gel. But you mentioned Adama Traore to sell for around 40, 45. I think they would get some money for him as well. I said anywhere between 35 to 45. I want to talk about a player that I want to get rid of from Wolves. And again, my guess and grimaces, not necessarily get rid of in the sense of he's rubbish, because he's really not rubbish. But I think they should cash in on Pedro Neto whilst they have the chance, whilst he's young. Get the hype in, replace him with a winger, because there's so many attacking options to go and grab. It baffles me how Premier League clubs sometimes don't see the amount of options that are really out there. And although Pedro Neto is a fantastic player, he is young. And he's in very good form right now. So this is arguably one of the best times to cash in on him. You look at his recent performances and they just suggest he's only going to get better. But you never know. And I think a lot of clubs do opt to sell players at a young age for a high fee, because they know that it could potentially go wrong and they could maybe lose out on the form. But I think Pedro Neto could go for anywhere from around 50 million to 60. I think if I'm being realistic, maybe around 50, but I think there's so many clubs which would like him. And if Wolves got him in, I started off my budget at 70. You sell him for 50 already, that's already 120 million you have to spend. With that, 35 for Adama, 155 million, that's going to make so much of a difference. And bringing in attackers to replace him on the wing, I'll mention that in a little bit later to see because I have got some options there on the list. But I did also mention potentially bringing in Wijnaldum, another player that I think could potentially come in that position that maybe Jorginho Wijnaldum could bring in if they don't want to spend the money. I don't know why, but really weirdly, I mean, right now I think maybe it's the Foden, maybe it's the Foden kind of vibe at the moment. He's been so good as a creative midfielder, and another creative midfielder that a lot of clubs are looking towards. I mean, I think I can't remember which list I was reading recently. There was a certain publication which ranked this guy way higher than I personally rate him. But not to mention that he's not a good player, but Liverpool's Curtis Jones as a loanee signing. Now think about it. Liverpool aren't going to want to get rid of him because he's a young talent, and he's one of the more prominent young talents at Liverpool. I think Wolves would be good for a gamble. It's a bit of an abstract one, but I feel like getting someone young in to get more experience in the first team, because Curtis Jones has had more experience this season than he has, in the last couple because of the Liverpool's injury problems. But a full season of regular starting football with good quality players under a progressive kind of forward-thinking, attacking-minded manager could be brilliant for him. But I know that's probably quite a controversial one, but a loan move, it would be cheap and it would free up some of the spaces on this pitch where I'm thinking of spending my money elsewhere. But that's another person I have potentially in the midfield, but I can see you're not a big fan of that one.
I don't think he gets in the team ahead of Leandro Dendoncker.
Oh, I don't know about that.
He doesn't get in the team ahead of Dendoncker. I'm sorry. Dendoncker is, he's that ball holding midfielder that like he's gonna deliver. Donker's 25. He can fill in that role, and he's good at filling that role. He's got so much strength about him. Yes, his technical ability isn't the best, but I think that in terms of technical ability, you've got Neves there as well. Like his passing is great. Yeah, I think that I don't think Curtis Jones would get into the side.
They're more holding though. You want someone who's going to, because the Wolves have been lacking creativity, but they've been lacking goals. And I think this young kind of creative midfielder, Phil Foden's obviously the most marketable young player for that position in the Premier League right now. He's been fantastic. I like Eberechi Eze at Crystal Palace, but they've just signed him. I'm a real big fan of him. I've definitely been singing his praises a lot on the podcast. And I think, I'm not the biggest supporter of Curtis Jones as a player, but I think he has shown some signs, and I don't know how long. I think Liverpool want to keep him around, but we need to see a full season of him. And I think maybe the reason why people would maybe be skeptical about that is because they haven't seen too much of him. But he has got the ability to create, and he's a good passer of the ball. But going a little bit further up the pitch and adding to the attack, he could be someone interesting. But my final position for the central midfield, which I'll mention quickly whilst I've got it, he's currently on loan over at Villa, but it's still a loan move. Or even though I think Villa are going to want to sign him on a permanent, I think Ross Barkley as well, because Ross Barkley's been it's been good. He's had injury problems, but he's been good when he's played for Villa.
Yeah.
Why not take a punt on him? A cheap, not gonna cost a lot of money, probably around anywhere between 20 to 30 million.
I feel like with Ross Barkley, you know, he's good for a side like Villa. But Wolves aren't going to want to be Villa. We don't want Wolves to be Villa. Let's be honest.
Villa are better than Wolves. I don't know what you want about
this
that.
season. But, you know, you take all these, you know, Ross Barkley's not going to want to stay there, you know. So let's just say this, right? Wolves should be better than Villa. Let's be honest. Wolverhampton Wanderers should be better than Aston Villa.
In the sense that they've been in the Premier League recently for long enough, I'll agree, yeah.
And you look at the caliber of players, you know, you would put Wolves against Villa and you'd arguably say, on paper, Wolves could beat Aston Villa.
Yeah.
And I think that with Ross Barkley, like with this Wolves side, we want players that's going to take this Wolves team to different levels. Yeah, we want them to take them to new heights. And with I think we're doing this as like a first transfer window. You know, say we're doing this in the summer of 2021. You know, bringing in Ross Barkley is he doesn't show a lot of ambition to go out there and look for European football. And Ross Barkley is a player that he's performed well at Chelsea, and he's performed well at Aston Villa. But I feel like his ceiling, he's starting to hit his ceiling, and I don't know. You know, Wolves could be a good destination for him, but I think that he'd only make it off the bench at some point.
No, I completely disagree. I think there's got to be a certain level of realism, because you as much as the Galactico signings are the goal, and Wolves are a club with ambition. We've 100% know that, we've seen that, but there's got to be some realism in the signings. I don't think anyone I've mentioned here has been too ungettable so far. I think everyone I've mentioned has been very realistic in terms of the budget that they've been getting, and we've seen in recent years Wolves have been looking to the Portuguese league and to the Spanish league. That's where a lot of Wolves' imports have come from. It hasn't been, you know, it's been working in some senses, but maybe we're coming to the end of that now. I think the signing Fabio Silva and Semedo, I think that the two signings which cost them so much money, and that they are exciting players and they're marquee players. Fabio Silva is one of the most highly touted young players, you know, and Nelson Semedo was right back at Barcelona. You know, that these are huge profiles. And I definitely think that recently they need to change the game plan. Whether Nuno's that guy, I'm not sure, because it definitely breaks the mold that Wolves have been following. But I feel like maybe looking to the Premier League and looking at players which have been good. I mean, because you mentioned Ross Barkley there, but he has come into that Aston Villa midfield and he's allowed Grealish to travel so much far forward. And Grealish is still the main man running the show, but he's allowed so much more freedom in that team. I'd love to hear some of your other opinions of who you've got to bring in. I've got some more ideas for the attack a little bit later, but who else would you bring in?
I mean, I've gone defensively.
Defensive.
I feel like they're lacking a lot of depth in the defense, and they're lacking a young player in that defense. And I think that it's, you know, that they've got a really bad aging defense. You know, Kilman is probably their youngest player, and he's 23. I want to bring in another 23-year-old, and I do think, you know, I'm going along your kind of Premier League, you know, realistic get, and it feels like the English quota. I mean, he's going to be a bit more expensive because he's English,
Yeah,
and that could add to it. But I've gone with Ben White from Brighton, and I think that he's got a very high ceiling. That lad has. He's performing very well this season. You know, Brighton would normally be relegation candidates, and they're kind of in that race, but they're 15th at the moment. They're doing better than I thought they were going to do, and maybe that's the team below them. And I think he needs a bigger team. You know, he needs a bigger team than Brighton. and his market value at the moment is about 20 million. I'm not sure how much that he would be able to be snapped for, but I think Ben White would, coming into that side alongside a Connor Cody, or alongside, say if we're sticking with the formation that Nuno's been playing, that three at the back and the two wing backs, him playing alongside Willy Bolly and Connor Cody, he could learn so much from both of those players, including Connor Cody, who's a fantastic English player as well. I think that he would slot into this team and elevate himself, not only the Wolves side. I know he's young, but he's had the Premier League experience, and I think he can only grow from here.
See, I think that's a very interesting mention, and I 100% agree to you that he is a good, young, exciting player, and he does need a bigger club than Brighton, but it needs to be bigger than Wolves. Ben White, I thought Ben White was going to be on Liverpool's shortlist when they needed a centre back. He's going to have a huge ceiling, and I don't think Wolves are going to be able to get him. But I think that also, you mentioned playing the 3-5-2. If we look at recently what Nuno's been doing, due to the 3-5-2 hasn't been working. Injury problems have made he's had to change. Right now, it's a 4-2-3-1. That's what he's adapting for a lot of the time. So I feel like the opposite thing that he used to do, he needs to be playing with a finished article centre-back. It needs to be a Ben White and a Van Dijk. It needs to be a Ben White and a Ruben Diaz. It needs to be somebody who's an absolute rock at the back as part of a back four to learn from. Just as, I think like Van Dijk was doing with Joe Gomez, which John Stones has been, an older player than Ruben Diaz, but Ruben Diaz has come in and leveled that out, and John Stones' form's picked up. He needs to be playing alongside a finished centre-back for me.
But also, Ben White can play in that centre defensive midfielder role, which is also, because he's quite good at playing the ball. And if, say Nuno starts out with that five at the back, the wing-backs and the centre-backs, if by some chance they want to switch it up mid-game, right? They go mid-game, they go for a 4-2-3-1 with the two DMs. That allows Ruben Neves to pop up the pitch. Or, if we go with your hypothetical squad, that allows Gini Wijnaldum to go up the pitch. It allows a lot more creativity. Ben White can sit in that defensive anchor role, in that defensive midfielder spot. Ruben Neves can then be the distributor of the ball. Gini Wijnaldum can go up and play up top.
Yeah.
So I think that it allows a lot of diversity. He's still young. He can be adapted into that centre defensive midfield position, or he can be adapted into a centre back position. It doesn't matter, because he's what, 23? He's still, I feel like maybe a move to Wolves would be the platform to then maybe move on. But if we were looking to just rebuild Wolves at this point, Wolves have got to show some urgency. They've got to show some urgency with their signings. And I think that signing a young centre back that's ready to take a team on, like, Wolves are the perfect club.
It's got to be a disagree from me on that one. I mean, I've got to respect the opinion, but I do not think that Wolves would give him the platform for growth. I think it would be an incredible signing. I think they'd be absolutely over the moon if they signed him, but I feel like he needs that big, strong mentor. And although, he's young and he can play a decent job at holding, we have seen that happen before, but for me, he's a centre-back, a solid centre-back. He needs someone to guide him. But I 100% agree with you in the sense that Wolves need to show ambition. And to get these good young players, you've got to have ambition. You've got to have guts. If I'm talking about some of the players that I'm thinking of, I mean, one of the players that I mentioned to get rid of is Pedro Neto, in the sense to get money in and cash in whilst you've got the chance. Around 50 million, let's say, for Pedro Neto, you're going to have a hole on that kind of left wing position where Pedro Neto has often been playing. A couple of players that I've got mentioned here. I'm going to mention the names first. I'm going to talk about my reasoning. I've got Callum Hudson-Odoi, and I've got Leon Bailey. Callum Hudson-Odoi often has played on the right, can play on the left as well. But I think that it's going to be tough under Tuchel. I want to see what he's going to do into because Tuchel is now this Galactico superstar manager. Frank Lampard at the helm at Chelsea, I thought he would have used Hudson-Odoi a lot more, because when Hudson-Odoi did come on, he was bagging, he was scoring goals. And Chelsea's signings they brought in were not scoring goals. So I think it's a real shame. I mean, it was only a season and a bit ago, we were looking at Hudson-Odoi possibly going to Bayern Munich. Because we were in the same conversations that we were saying the words Jadon Sancho, we were saying Callum Hudson-Odoi, that these two guys were very equal on par in terms of on the wing positions. So I think that Hudson-Odoi could potentially be out on the exit door, but the hype around the clubs of like a Bayern Munich, I think, has leveled a bit down. So I think maybe doing a bit like a Wilfried Zaha, he took that risk and went to United, went back to Crystal Palace and kind of found some form at Palace, and he obviously he's been there since. But I think if Hudson-Odoi could go down to a Wolves, I think that would be a coup. They could get him for cheaper than 50 million. I think it would be it might be tough. Maybe Tuchel's got plans for him. If we look at the other player that I mentioned there, Leon Bailey, again, I think he's like 23, 24. He's still a young guy. If you're not familiar, he's a Jamaican left winger playing over in Bayern Leverkusen in the Bundesliga. Someone that we've seen a lot of in the past whenever we've been doing a kind of like scout watches, if we're talking about players that we've been interested in. And still young, still talented. I think he's there to be got as well. I think you'd be looking at around 40 to 50 million if you want to go get him. His heights have gone from when he first was bagging. The talk about him's gone down a little bit now, but he's still a young player, and I still think they're going to want to hang on to him. So maybe 35 to 40 maybe for him. I think. I don't think he's going any more than that. I don't know. I think that they could. Now is the time to capitalize on him, in my opinion.
It could be, but I do think that his market value is still, is he better than Adama Traore?
Yeah.
Why are we selling Adama Traore for more than they're getting Leon Bailey for? That's the sort of factor I would put into it. I think that Leon Bailey would be about 50 million.
I could definitely see that. I think what happens with Adama Traore, I think why they could potentially still get money for him if people maybe haven't been paying too close attention. It's just because, as you mentioned earlier, he's just an absolute athlete. He's a freak of nature athlete, and he is obscenely fast. Can be very skillful. So there's a mold there to create a player, and whenever you've seen him, we saw him at Barcelona's academy, you saw him at Middlesbrough, Aston Villa. There's always been these flashes. And it's like, he just can't quite do the end result. But I think a club would look back on the season that he had prior and would be like, wow, this guy's being available to us. Let's take the risk. And I think it would be most likely a Spanish club. I think I could see him going back to Spain. But I think Leon Bailey could be an absolutely fantastic player to bring in and play along those wings. The only other player that I had mentioned in the wing position, which I think would be an interesting signing, Watford's João Pedro. That one is a bit more of a different signing. Obviously, they got him in when I think it was the season they went down, and there was a lot of not too much known about him. But a young player, a young winger. There was a reason they had him. I think that one suits a lot more of a Wolves signing. It's based on current previous trends. The only real difference is they're not getting him from the source. They're getting him from an English club which beat him to it. So I feel like that one, again, you maybe have to pay a little bit of money to get him out of Watford just because of the English club, but you could get him for cheaper. And if he came to a Premier League club with the idea if he was probably going to stay in the Prem, he went down, he's probably going to want to get back up to the Premier League if he's in England. So I think he could be another one, but not so much as my first two mentions. But I think Hudson-Odoi and Leon Bailey are my dream picks in this Wolves scenario.
See, for me, I've gone Watford as well.
Ooh.
But I definitely haven't gone for João Pedro because he stinks of Fabio Silva. He's kind of that young player that's not ready to start in the first team of a Premier League side yet.
Yeah, I think he's more of a molded player. He's kind of like clay. He needs shaping a bit before maybe he's fully ready.
He needs time to grow, much like Fabio Silva does. So loan moves and staying at Watford, time to grow. He might just end up like Dwight Gale. Who knows? So I have gone for Watford, and I've gone for two wingers from Watford, and it's a crime that neither of them have been picked up.
I know who you're going to say now. Now that I know you're going to say, I could totally. Yeah.
So that left hand side is definitely maybe because in my thing Neto hasn't been taken. So Gerard Deulofeu, he's on loan at Udinese at the moment. Even if he comes off the bench, he's a good role player for this squad. He's good on the ball, and he showed glimmers of a lot of shine at Everton as well. He showed at Everton. Yeah. He another one of those players that has played for Barcelona, and he's going to be dirt cheap. His market value is about 10 million now. He's going to be dirt cheap.
that's maybe an indication of a lack in quality now. Maybe he has shifted down.
But I mean, there's still quality there because Serie A, he got relegated to the Championship, and Serie A teams wanted to take him. Udinese, yes, aren't the biggest name in the Serie A, but neither are Wolves in the Premier League. So
Yeah,
you've
yeah.
got to think about that. And Gerard Deulofeu, yeah, he's not going to be one to take them forward, but he's a stepping stone to different transfer windows. We're not looking to let them win the Premier League in the first window.
Mm.
Gerard Deulofeu is someone that you placehold in and bring in to be like, okay, does this type of player work? And if it sticks, it's great. But
Yeah.
then you sort of have to, if he's there at a Championship club, he's got the experience in the Premier League, he's got the experience in the league, he's got experience he's got so much experience now, and he's still only 26.
Yeah.
So he's not old. He's about to hit his prime technically.
Actually, that's just hit me like a punch in the face. He's 26.
He's 26.
Oh my God, he's been around for ages.
Exactly. This is what I mean. He's about to hit his prime, and he's sitting at Udinese and on loan from Watford. As soon as he comes back from Watford, if Udinese don't take their, I'm not sure if they got an option to buy, but
Yeah.
if they don't take it, it's up for Wolves, and they can take it along with that right hand side that's going to need filling after Adama Traore's departure. This is kind of my second right winger. I do have another right winger that I've done my scouting on. It might be a bit expensive, but Ismaila Sarr, you know how big of a fan I am of him, and he's been bagging in the Championship, so he could come up to this Wolves side and add a few more goals.
Yeah. Yeah, he's another player that I thought was going to end up going the second they went down, but some things just don't work like that, do they? I mean, we were looking at Bournemouth, we were looking at Norwich, and we were thinking, how are some of these players still there? But yeah, Sarr's another one of those added to the list, so I can see the quality there. I can see why someone would get someone like him in.
And his market value as well. I think that's about 18 million. It's gone down since he was in the Premier League, so he
Yeah.
could be bought from Watford for he could be bought for about 25 million.
Mm.
It could be, maybe they could demand a little bit more, but 25 to 30 million for someone in the Championship that's going to potentially elevate the club as well. But I think in terms of a right winger that I think could very elevate this, and I think that if you were looking into a swap deal with Adama Traore and this player and a bit of money, Adama Traore and a bit of money, maybe 20 to 30 million for a player that a lot of people might not be too in tune with at the moment, and he's playing in the Eredivisie for Ajax. It's that Brazilian right winger Anthony, and he's scored 8 goals and he's got 8 assists in 20 games in the Eredivisie this season.
Yeah.
Wolves are lacking goals and creativity. What is he brought to Ajax at the moment? Goals and assists, goals and creativity. That is one of the most crucial things that Wolves are in for. Yes, they don't have a striker, but say if Raul Jimenez gets injured again, they've got they've got a potential source of goals. And I think Anthony is one of those players that he's so quick, he's very agile, he's got very good dribbling ability. I think that's someone that potentially Man United should have looked towards as well, in that sort of period. But I'm not saying that they're going to get him cheap. This Anthony kid, he's going to be maybe about 50 to 60 million pounds, and that's probably where my lack of budget beforehand is going to come in. Ben White's also going to be expensive, but Anthony is one of these players that you're going to look about 50, 40 to 50, maybe a bit more than 50 for him. He's still younger. I'm pretty sure he's 20, 23. No, he's not. He's not 23. He's 20. He's just
he's
20.
younger than that. Yeah.
And he should be up for grabs for Wolves to take. He's a signing that can score goals. He's very creative. I think it would fit what Wolves are missing.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally see where you're coming from there. I mean, it's no secret that Wolves have been lacking the firepower and the goals. In terms of me, that's my main signings done. You had one more on your list, if I wasn't mistaken.
Yeah, and it's nothing to do with the starting lineup. Raul Jimenez is going to be coming back, so the striker position for me is where they need backup. Fabio Silva's not going to cut it at the backup striker position. So once they're done with Willian Jose, I feel like it's going to have to be another strike. And I looked actually into maybe someone around Raul Jimenez's age, someone that can come off the bench and give it a lot of energy, or fill in if Raul Jimenez is injured. And I looked to a league that no one actually looks towards anymore, the Chinese Super League. I looked at Cedric Bakambu, the Dominican Republic of Congo striker who once played for Villarreal. I think he went to China for £35 million.
Yeah.
And all you're looking for is a bench player that can score. Bakambu, yes, he has played well in the teams that he's been at before. He's gone out to the Chinese Super League, and his career has kind of gone down because of the league that he's in. And I think that Bakambu could come in as a, maybe what was he looking? Maybe 15 to 20 million pounds for a bench striker. And that's just because Jimenez is going to stay there. And he can score goals. And if it doesn't work, again, it's like Gerard De La Fea that I said earlier. It's a stepping stone for me. I mean, even still with, if we're looking for Gerard De La Fea again, we've got Pundits as well. Pundits can play on that left-hand side too. So, yeah, for me, Bakambu is going to be that one that's filling in for Jimenez if he gets injured, because Jimenez is 29, so is Bakambu.
Yeah.
And I think that Bakambu, he can play on the wing as well, because he's absolutely rapid as well. So, yeah, those, I think for 20 million, I think at the most, my budget, I spend 105 million, and at the least, it's 85 million. But those are with the sales of Adama Traore and Romain Saiz.
I think for me, I'm spending roughly around 70 million, which would take me to around my initial budget that I started with. But if I'm looking at the ones that I had to bring in, defense, there's work there, but and same with attack. But I'm going on my three of Leon Bailey, Jorginho Wijnaldum, and potentially Ross Barkley. I'm looking at around 70 million being spent there potentially on a wishful day. But we'd love to know what you guys think. This has been more of an experimental podcast, and just to end it on kind of a note, I was mentioning a couple of managers that I feel like could potentially take over at the helm from Nuno if Nuno was to go. If Nuno did go, a dream manager that I'd love to see, I'd want to see him back in the Premier League because he has so much more to prove, would be Rafa Benitez. I think Rafa. Can you imagine? I would imagine Rafa Benitez, if he went and took the kind of thing that Nuno's doing now with the 4-2-3-1, built on that, some of the signings that either of us have mentioned here, can you imagine what he'd do? It'd be absolutely incredible.
You have just opened up my mind to a lot of potential there. Oh my goodness. Maybe I do want Nuno out.
He's one that I wanted to mention at the end there. Other managers that are available, obviously, you've got Lampard available, which I think would be catastrophic right now. And then the only other manager that I think would be potentially at risk would be Hasenhüttl over at Southampton. But because I do think Hasenhüttl was a great manager, but 2 9-0s do not look good.
We had to mention it, didn't we? All the commentary team love to mention it while Southampton are playing. So,
but we'd love to know what you guys think in terms of Wolves. Who would you sign? If you're watching this on YouTube, comment below. If you're listening on streaming services, or if you want to interact with us on our social media platforms, as always, it's Pundits Average for Twitter, Average Pundits for Facebook and Instagram as well. And if you want to get in touch with us to potentially be on the podcast or any other inquiries, it's the averagepundits@outlook.com. And also, the competition is still on, guys, for another couple of weeks. So make sure you go and find our posts on Twitter and Instagram. I mean, why wouldn't you enter it? It's free, isn't it?
It's free. Just enter it already.
Enter it. You never know, you could win yourself a free mystery football shirt box from us and the guys over at Mystic. So thank you very much, as always. Thank you very much for joining me as well, Reece. It's been a great episode.
Yes, definitely. As you say, subscribe. We're up to 124, I think, right now. So make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell. Make sure you don't miss another podcast wherever you get them. Also, if you want to see another rebuild like this, whether we go expensive with another team or whether we take a struggling team in the Premier League at the moment that's in the relegation zone and bring them up to the promised land within maybe 10 transfer windows, it'll probably take out that much. But yeah, let us know if you want us to cover any more of these rebuilds, and we'll be happy to do one, because it's been fun. It's been very fun.
Been absolutely fantastic. So thank you very much, as always, guys, and we will see you next time.
Subscribe to The Average Pundits on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite streaming service, and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Don't forget to like and share this video.